Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage President of Manatos and Manatos, Mike Manatos.
Your Holiness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you to the Concordia team for your hard work on this important summit. It is truly remarkable all that Nick and Matt have accomplished in 6 short years and the tremendous potential impact of their work that lies ahead. Well, I'm honored to introduce Vice President Biden is quite a humbling and challenging task, for there are few people in the world who are as well accomplished, well respected, and have devoted so much of their life to public service. Our family has been truly blessed to know and work with the extraordinary Biden family for over 40 years. And in our work with hundreds of U.S. policymakers over 3 generations, we've never known a finer public servant and finer human being than Joe Biden. We're thankful that this man of great consequence, in his first foreign trip since leaving the White House, has chosen to visit Greece and participate in this important summit, although those that know him as Joe Bidenopoulos are not so surprised. During his 37 years in the United States Senate, including as the powerful chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and the last 8 years as Vice President of the United States, there were few, if any, more passionate advocates for Greece, Cyprus, and the ecumenical patriarchate than Joe Biden. And he knows well our faith and our spiritual leader. Vice President Biden has said of the hundreds of religious and other world leaders with whom he's met, the 2 most Christ-like were Nelson Mandela and His All Holiness Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew. In fact, when he spoke before the Greek Orthodox Church's Clergy Lady Congress in 2014, he turned to the Catholic Archbishop in attendance and said, "Your Grace, if I ever leave the Catholic faith, I'm going Greek Orthodox." Last October, the Washington Orchidea Foundation had the pleasure of presenting its Courage Award to Vice President Biden and posthumously to his son, Beau. There, Vice President Biden spoke for his love of Greece and the Greek people and how it has affected his life. He said, quote, "My affinity for the Greek community runs deep because it is grounded in the same values I was raised in, the same unwillingness to bend, the unwillingness to bow. I've never found a group of people more loyal, more courageous, not just in the annals of history, but in my personal relationships." One of the highlights of this evening was the surprise remarks of Vice President Biden's wife of 40 years, Dr. Jill Biden. The then Second Lady of the United States gave what I believe was one of the most telling descriptions of the magic of Joe Biden. Dr. Biden said of her husband, quote, "Joe never picks the easy jobs. He's always had the courage to stand up for what is right, no matter how impossible the fight. Despite any challenges, despite any obstacles, despite any setbacks in life, through it all, Joe has never given up. Joe and our son Beau dedicated their lives to serving others, finding the strength to speak out for those who are silenced, to stand up for those who are unable to defend themselves, and always for those in need of hope." I echo the sentiments that Nick Logothetis expressed that evening of Vice President and Dr. Biden when he said, "I hope one day to demonstrate a fragment of the empathy, insight, and courage of these 2 remarkable people." And the work of Joe Biden is far from over. He's chosen to take on the leading cause of death worldwide and the disease that took from them their oldest son, cancer. He's transformed his White House cancer moonshot into the Biden Cancer Initiative. Their goal is to continue injecting a sense of urgency into the cancer research and, in the Concordia way, reimagine how public-private partnerships can better organize their resources and collaborate to take on cancer. His Biden Foundation is also taking on ending violence against women, protecting children, the Penn Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement, military families and community colleges, equality, and strengthening the middle class. It is clear that Joe Biden believes, as President John F. Kennedy did when he said, "The Greeks were right. Happiness is the full use of your powers along the lines of excellence." And it is also clear that Joe Biden has lived a life of philotimo. For those of you unfamiliar with the term, I refer you to the words of George Logothetis, and words that in many ways define the life of Joe Biden. George Logothetis said that philotimo is duty, loyalty, integrity, honor, love, trust, faith, and perhaps most important of all, the pride in being decent. It means that the strong have a duty to help the weak. It means we should have conviction in our values and our principles. It means taking the high road and rising above pettiness and triviality. At a time when many are concerned about the future of the United States and the world community, Joe Biden, as he has so many times in his life, even following unimaginable personal tragedies, is stepping forward to lead with optimism, strength, and philotimo. It is my great honor to introduce to you the 47th Vice President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden.
Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. You all know virtually none of that is true. But I thank you for that introduction, Mike, and it's an honor to be here with you today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my second opportunity to be at a Concordia summit, and happening for the first time in Europe. And Nick and Matthew and everyone at Concordia, congratulations on the continued growth of your organization, as well as your ability to draw so many creative thinkers and leaders from around the globe, expanding, hosting regional summits, creating connections and opportunities through collaboration all along the way. It's pretty remarkable what you've done in just 6 years. I know how committed you are to leveraging the power of partnerships to affect positive change, and now we're seeing the impact of your campaigns to ensure sustainability of a global food supply and to end labor trafficking. I'm happy to be here participating and to play a very, very small part in your efforts. As I said, I'm honored to be here, and I'm delighted to be back in Athens. I've been here many times, and it's no exaggeration to say that the Greek people have shaped my consciousness. The Greek community in which I received my early political baptism, the Greek community around the world, and throughout my Senate career, and as Vice President, I've always believed that a strong Greece is firmly anchored in Europe, is critical to the long-term security and stability of my country, of the United States. You know, that's been true for much longer than my 4 decades in public service. President Truman recognized that critical importance of Greece at the end of World War II, when he called on Congress in 1947 to provide significant aid to Greece. It was his objective, and his argument boiled down to a simple proposition, a simple basic principle that's as true today as it was when he stated it in 47. He said, and I quote, "The free people of the world look to us to support and maintain their freedoms. If we falter in our leadership, we may endanger the peace of the world, and we shall surely endanger the welfare of our own nation." He didn't speak in terms of moral obligation. He didn't speak in terms of generosity. He didn't speak in terms of somehow standing up and providing charity for the Greek people. Truman recognized that we needed a strong Greece because it was in the self-interest of the United States of America. And in return, Greece has stood with the United States as a critical partner here in Europe, as an ally in NATO, one that is always invested in our common defense. Greece and the United States have fought shoulder to shoulder in every conflict in the past century, from World War I to our ongoing campaign to wipe out the pernicious threat of ISIS. And to this day, sailors serve alongside one another in Suba Bay, one of the great assets for the alliance and incredibly important to both our countries. And it's precisely because of this that President Obama and I understood the value and the critical importance of this partnership, that we worked so hard to convince our European allies, friends in Europe, to help Greece navigate the financial crisis for the good of all of Europe, not simply with the narrow aim of averting a financial collapse, but to put the Greek economy back on a sustainable footing, to establish the economic conditions that will create jobs and rising incomes so hardworking folks here in Greece can invest in their children's future. And I might note parenthetically, that requires debt forgiveness, in my view. Today, Europe and the United States continue to face challenges, some familiar, some of which require us to act together, and some of which require us to act together in new ways. The economies of Greece and other European countries continue to struggle to find a needed growth pattern. The people of Cyprus remain tantalizingly close to the promise of a lasting peace accord. Weak rule of law and bad governance are exacerbating the political tensions in the Balkans. In Eastern Ukraine, Russia, controlling forces continue to maim and kill Ukrainians, bringing the death toll so far this year to nearly 100. And across the entire continent, we see how Russia, and I'll be blunt and precise, Mr. Putin, seeks to destabilize European solidarity, interfering with elections across Europe and in the United States, seeking to sow doubt and undermine the legitimacy of NATO and the EU and other institutions, weaponizing corruption to subvert democratic institutions. They're at it here in Greece, they're at it here all throughout Europe. And the energy crisis in Europe, the dependence on gas from Russia, only makes it easier for Moscow to exploit points of weakness in European unity. And without consensus, ISIS and the terrorist organizations targeting children and families across Europe in an effort to get us to abandon our values will have been a long, hard fight if we cannot do it together and focus on the source of our strength, which is our value system. The biggest refugee crisis since World War II continued to displace millions, and the impacts on Europe and of the civil war in Syria are obvious. I want to thank, I might add, the people of Greece for their enormous burden they have shouldered in sheltering and caring for refugees fleeing unspeakable horrors. My wife, Jill, now is with George's wife in Chios right now, and has a role as the board chair of Save the Children USA, continuing to focus our attention on this crisis. And on top of everything, demagogues and xenophobes are doing their best to play on the understandable fears that some people fears about the future, about their safety, the drive of nationalist populist movements to seek to unwind decades of progress. Europe and the United States have made together all this time, this progress, and they're attempting to unwind it. In the New York Times today, there is an article on the front page of the Times as I was coming over. I read, you may have seen it. It says that it talks about how in the United States of America and throughout the world, there is dying optimism that even though they think the situation in each of the European countries is better off than it was 5 years ago, a vast majority of the people in each of our countries in Western Europe believe that their children will not be as well off as we are. That is a frightening prospect. That is something we cannot let be sustained. Our transatlantic partnership remains essential to addressing these global challenges. As it has been in the past for 7 decades, it remains as essential today as it was when Truman announced the doctrine. Together, when we stand united, is the only way to defend the liberal international order that we built after World War II and which has been the foundation of our security and prosperity for decades. I was fortunate enough in my retirement from the vice presidency to have the University of Pennsylvania set up the Biden Center. And the single focus of that center, with a significant staff that came from the last administration, is to work on what you're working on here, basically how to maintain this liberal world order in the changing world we find ourselves in. And to do that, we have to resist the forces of European disintegration and maintain our long-standing insistence on a Europe whole, free, and at peace. A strong Europe is a cohesive Europe. And that's the linchpin, not just for European security, but for America's security as well. We can only meet these challenges if we act together. The European project, in my opinion, is one of the most audacious and consequential visions of the past century. The idea that after centuries of conflict, Europe could reinvent itself as an integrated community, one committed to political solidarity, the free flow of goods and people, the solemn obligation to collective defense. It was never inevitable. It was never inevitable. It was hard-earned. And we must never forget that how we got here. Not take for granted success is going to continue unless we begin to fight back and fight harder than we have been. The United States, our NATO allies, and all the nations of Europe are in this together. As the eldest and strongest democracies in the world, we have a responsibility to beat back the challenges that we now find at our door. If we don't fight for our values, no one else will. We have to project a unified front. I know at this moment there are questions about what kind of leadership the world can expect from the United States of America going forward. But I want to be very clear that there is still, in the United States of America, a strong bipartisan consensus in the United States, especially in the United States Congress, that European security is vital to U.S. security. That is deeply rooted in both political parties, notwithstanding what you occasionally hear from this new administration. And that the Truman Doctrine still applies. If we falter in our leadership, we may endanger the peace of the world, and we shall surely endanger the welfare of our own nation. That is as relevant a comment today as it was in 1947. The United States has had moments of turning inward in the past, but we've always overcome them, just as we will overcome this. History has proven that the defense of free nations in Europe has always, always, always been in America's best interest and is America's fight. So this is an important moment to have this discussion, to focus on the future of Europe, to renew our shared commitment to the transatlantic alliance. And just as I promised in my final speech as Vice President, I'm here today because I intend to keep using my voice, no matter how insignificant it may become, my power as a citizen, my new platform at the Penn Biden Center to help keep the transatlantic alliance strong and vibrant. Our common future depends on it. Greek unity, Greece's growth, independence, economic security is vital to this part of the world and vital to the United States of America. You are the linchpin to everything else that's going to happen. And I promise you, the vast majority of the members of both political parties stand with Greece and stand for the transatlantic alliance. I thank you all for listening.